In the cold, unforgiving dark of the 41st millennium, truth is a commodity rarer and more precious than any archaeotech shard or forgotten STC. It is a galaxy defined by absolutes, a tapestry woven in the stark threads of black and white. There is loyalty, a burning, fanatical devotion to the God-Emperor of mankind, a faith that fuels armies and holds 1,000,000 worlds against the encroaching dark. And there is heresy, the ultimate sin, a vile corruption that twists flesh and soul, a betrayal so profound it echoes through the very fabric of the Imperium. For 10,000 years, this duality has been the bedrock of the Imperium of man. You are either with the Golden Throne, or you are its sworn enemy. There is no middle ground, no shade of grey in the blinding light of the Emperor's holy fire. And yet one legion defies this absolute. One name, when whispered in the halls of the Inquisition or the scriptoriums of the Adeptus Terra, invokes not simple hatred, but a chilling, profound confusion. The Alpha Legion, the Ekth, the last. To speak of the Alpha Legion is to speak in riddles and contradictions. They are the serpent that eats its own tail, the reflection in a shattered mirror, the echo of a voice that never spoke. In a universe that demands unwavering allegiance, how can a single entity, a brotherhood of transhuman warriors forged for total war, exist in a quantum state of loyalty and treason? Simultaneously, how can the same legion be credited with victories that saved entire sectors for the Imperium, while also being damned for atrocities that aided the arch-traitor Horus in his quest to burn Terra to the ground? This is the fundamental paradox of the Hydra, the question that has haunted imperial historians and strategists for 100 centuries. Were they traitors who occasionally served the Emperor's goals by accident, or were they loyalists forced to wear the mask of betrayal in service of a higher, more terrible purpose? To comprehend the Alpha Legion is to abandon the imperial creed of simple truths. One must instead embrace their iconography, the multi-headed Hydra. It is not merely a symbol, it is a doctrine, a philosophy, a state of being. Cut off one head and 2 more shall take its place. This is not a boast of regeneration, but a statement of operational reality. For every Alpha Legion plot uncovered, 2 more are already in motion. For every commander killed, 2 more operatives assume his identity and continue his mission without pause. For every truth you think you have grasped, they have already seeded 2 new lies to obscure it. Their war was never one of attrition or glorious charges. It was and remains a war of information, of perception, of deception so total and all-encompassing that reality itself becomes their weapon. In their grim theater of war, truth is a blade to be wielded against the enemy, and a lie is the finest suit of power armor. This is not a simple chronicle of heroes or villains. Such childish notions have no place in the grim darkness of the far future. This is an autopsy of a lie, an archaeological dig into a history deliberately buried under mountains of conflicting reports, falsified records, and dying declarations from men who no longer knew which side they were truly fighting for. We will peel back the layers of deception not to find a single shining truth at the center, but to understand the shape of the labyrinth itself. We will examine the evidence for the prosecution, the damning acts of open rebellion that painted them as traitors of the highest order. Then we will turn to the whispers in the shadows, the unsettling clues and shocking revelations that suggest a loyalty so deep, so profound, it required the sacrifice of their own honor, their own souls, and the very memory of their name. Forget the tales of the noble ultramarines or the tragic blood angels. Their stories, for all their glory and sorrow, are written in straight lines. The saga of the Alpha Legion is a Mobius strip, a tangled knot of intent and outcome where beginning and end are meaningless distinctions. To ask are they traitors or are they loyal is to ask the wrong question. To understand the sons of Alpharius, one must ask, in a war for the soul of humanity, what is the greater loyalty to the Emperor, the man, or to his dream, the future of mankind itself. And what terrible price must be paid when those two things are no longer the same. The story of the Alpha Legion is the answer, and it is a truth wrapped in a lie, hidden inside a riddle. Hydra Dominatus. The Great Crusade was an engine of reunification, a roaring fire of conquest and discovery that burned across the galaxy. One by one, the lost sons of the Emperor were found, each a demigod returned to his rightful place at the head of a legion of transhuman warriors. There was the noble Lion, the savage Russ, the stoic Dawn, the brilliant Guilliman. Each discovery was a triumph, a galactic celebration that added another mythic hero to the pantheon of the nascent Imperium. And then, for a long time, there was silence. The 20th plinth on Terra remained empty. The Exeth Legion, its ranks filled with warriors psycho-indoctrinated to be the most adaptable and independent of all Astartes, fought without its genetic father. They were orphans, effective and deadly but incomplete. Then, on a nameless world designated Testra Prime, the silence was broken. It was not the Emperor who found his last son, but his favored child, the War Master Horus Lupercal. The Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, resplendent in his unique Terminator armor, stepped from the ramp of his lander expecting to meet a feral warlord or a philosopher king. He found neither. The man who awaited him was, to the eyes of a demigod, distressingly normal. He was an Astartes, certainly, but shorter than any of his brothers, possessing none of the overt, reality-bending grandeur that clung to them like a mantle. He was clad in simple, unadorned power armor, the color of the deep sea. His face was sharp, intelligent, but unremarkable. Only his eyes held the true measure of the being within. They were ancient, calculating, and they met the War Master's gaze not with awe or aggression, but with an unnerving sense of assessment, as if Horus were the one being discovered and evaluated. His name, he said, was Alfarius. The meeting was brief, professional, almost anticlimactic. Horus, the master of charisma and brotherhood, felt a strange disquiet. He had welcomed a brother into the fold, yet he felt as if he had just shaken hands with a shadow, a presence that was both there and not there, a mind that operated on a level of parallax he could not quite comprehend. The true nature of that disquiet, the secret that would define the XX Legion for all eternity, was not revealed on Testra Prime. It was a truth kept hidden even from the majority of the Primarchs, a secret known only to the last two sons themselves. There was not one Primarch of the Alpha Legion. There were two, Alfarius and Omegon, identical twins, two bodies sharing one soul, one purpose. This was their foundational principle, the secret weapon upon which their entire legion was built. While Alfarius stood on the bridge of the vengeful spirit conversing with Horus and being welcomed into the Imperium's high command, Omegon was light years away, leading a covert assault on a Xenos stronghold, acting with perfect foreknowledge of the resources Horus would commit, because he was living the consequences of a conversation his other half was having at that very moment. This duality was their greatest strength. They were a command structure that could not be decapitated. They would swap places, sometimes for days, sometimes for years. One would take the public role, the figurehead, the Primarch Alfarius, while the other, the Efrit, would operate in the shadows, executing the secret facets of their labyrinthine plans. No one, not even the most astute members of their own legion, could be entirely certain which twin they were speaking to at any given time. The Primarch was not a person. He was a position. He was not a single man. He was a shared consciousness. This secret permeated every level of their existence, creating a network of command and intelligence that was fluid, redundant, and utterly unbreakable. The Hydra had two heads from the very beginning. With their Primarchs, their singular Primarch as the galaxy knew him restored to them, the XX Legion was unleashed, and their philosophy of war was unlike anything the Great Crusade had ever seen. They were not the glorious champions of the Ultramarines, nor the stoic Castellans of the Imperial Fists, nor the berserker shock troops of the World Eaters. The Alpha Legion viewed open battle as a failure, a clumsy and inefficient expenditure of resources. Victory to them was not achieved through overwhelming force, but through surgical application of the perfect stratagem. They were a legion of spies, saboteurs, assassins, and information brokers who happened to wear the power armor of Space Marines. Their methodology was insidious and brutally effective. Before a single bolt gun was fired, Alpha Legion operatives would have already infiltrated the target world. They would spend months, sometimes years, living as natives, rising through the ranks of government, the military, and seditious cults. They learned every secret, every weakness, every political fault line. They would turn generals against their masters, incite civil wars, cripple infrastructure, and assassinate key leaders. By the time the Alpha Legion fleet arrived in orbit, the planet was often already tearing itself apart. The war was won before the battle had even been announced. Their warriors, often operating in small autonomous cells known as headhunters, were masters of disguise and misdirection, their ceramite armor capable of shifting colors and patterns to mimic that of other legions, sowing confusion and paranoia wherever they trod. They were the perfect weapon for a campaign of subtlety and subterfuge, a scalpel in an arsenal of sledgehammers, and they wielded it with terrifying precision. The methods of the Alpha Legion, while undeniably effective, began to sow seeds of mistrust among their own brothers during the Great Crusade. Where other legions brought worlds into compliance through honorable combat and displays of overwhelming power, the Exsect left behind a trail of whispers, broken societies, and victories that felt strangely hollow. Their campaigns were masterpieces of subversion monuments to a philosophy that valued the result above all else, including honor, glory, and brotherhood. The compliance of the Nerthine Deep clans serves as a chilling example. The Nerthine were a resilient strain of abhumans dwelling in vast subterranean fortress cities, their entire culture built upon paranoia and clan-based warfare. A direct assault by any other legion would have resulted in a bloody, protracted war of attrition, costing tens of thousands of Astartes' lives. The Alpha Legion did not send an invasion force. They sent 50 operatives. For 2 standard years, these agents vanished into the planet's deep networks. They surgically altered their own physiology to better resemble the Nerthine, learned their complex codes of honor and their guttural language. They became them. One operative rose to become the trusted bodyguard of a clan chieftain. Another manipulated the ore markets to cause a famine in a rival hold. A third, posing as a shaman, preached a new doctrine of weakness and corruption among the ruling classes. They planted evidence-faked assassination attempts and manipulated ancient rivalries. The Alpha Legion did not attack the Nerthine's fortresses. They attacked their minds, poisoning the trust that held their society together. When the final blow came, it wasn't from a fleet in orbit. It was a civil war orchestrated and fueled by unseen hands that shattered the Nerthine civilization. Only then did the Alpha Legion's true fleet arrive, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers, executing the handful of exhausted, universally despised leaders who remained and offering the broken populace the stability of the imperial truth. The world fell without the loss of a single space marine in open combat. It was a perfect victory, yet it was a victory that left a bitter taste in the mouths of those who witnessed it. They had not liberated a world. They had dismantled a soul. Compounding this growing sense of unease was the Legion's ubiquitous and often baffling battle cry for the Emperor to the stoic Imperial Fists or the noble Ultramarines. This was a sacred oath, a declaration of ultimate fealty shouted in the heat of righteous battle. When uttered by the Alpha Legion, it felt different. It was a phrase they used to justify every action, no matter how questionable. An Alpha Legion headhunter slitting the throat of an allied planetary governor deemed inefficient would do so with those words on his lips. A saboteur cell detonating a promethium refinery that would plunge an Imperial hive into starvation to root out a single cultist would report their success under the same banner. Their cry became a veil, a mantra that deflected scrutiny and judgment. To their critics like the ever-vigilant Mortarion or the straightforward Leman Russ, it was the height of cynicism, a mockery of the very loyalty they claimed to uphold. How could acts of assassination, deceit, and engineered anarchy be truly for the Emperor? But to the Alpha Legion themselves, it was a statement of absolute truth. In their cold, logical calculus, they were the only ones who truly understood the cost of building a galactic empire. Honor was a luxury. Mercy was a tactical liability. The lives of millions were a resource to be spent. Every act of sabotage, every lie, every betrayal of trust was a necessary evil, a small sin committed in the service of a greater good. Their methods were dark and winding, but they believed with a conviction as fervent as any zealots that they all led to one place, the Emperor's final victory. This unwavering belief, this declaration of loyalty in the face of their own dark deeds, blurred the lines between pragmatism and heresy until even their closest allies could no longer tell the difference. They were a blade that cut both ways, serving the Imperium while simultaneously undermining the very principles of brotherhood and honor upon which it was being built. All the whispers and doubts that had followed the Alpha Legion throughout the Great Crusade were mere prelude. They were faint discords in the grand symphony of the Imperium. But on the black sands of Istvan V in the haunted Urgal Depression, those discords swelled into a deafening chorus of betrayal. The event that would forever be known as the Drop Site Massacre would become the single defining act of the Alpha Legion's history, the moment they drew an undeniable line in the sand and chose their side in the war for the soul of mankind. The first wave of the assault had been a bloodbath. 3 full legions, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, had descended into hell. They had thrown themselves at the fortified positions of the declared traitors, Horus's own sons of Horus, the Emperor's children, the Death Guard and the World Eaters. They fought with the righteous fury of the betrayed, but the resistance was fanatical, the cost in lives staggering. Their Primarch Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands had already fallen, his life taken by his once closest brother Fulgrim. The Loyalists were battered, bleeding, and on the verge of being overwhelmed. But they held on their faith, placed in the imminent arrival of the second wave, a force of 4 more legions dispatched by Horus to support them. Their saviors were coming. The sky above the Urgal Depression turned to fire as thousands of drop pods burned through the atmosphere. The sigils became clear, the iron mask of the Iron Warriors, the screaming skull of the Night Lords, the fiery book of the Word Bearers, and the multi-headed Hydra of the Alpha Legion. A wave of relief washed over the exhausted Loyalist lines. The Iron Warriors would establish unbreakable defenses. The Night Lords would sow terror amongst the enemy. And the Alpha Legion? The Alpha Legion would bring their strategic genius, turning the tide with a single brilliant maneuver. A wounded Salamander's captain watched the cobalt blue pods land, forming a perfect cordon behind the Loyalist lines. He allowed himself a grim smile. The trap was about to be sprung on the traitors. The hammer had arrived to crush them against the anvil of the first wave. The moment the last pod landed, a single system-wide Vox command was issued, a simple code of activation, Hydra Dominatus. Then the universe for the Loyalists on Istvan V was turned inside out. The hammer did not fall on the traitors. It fell on the anvil. The sound was not of a battle line reinforcing, but of an execution commencing. All along the newly formed perimeter, tens of thousands of bolters belonging to the Alpha Legion and their fellow turncoats swiveled not towards the sons of Horus, but inwards towards the exposed backs of the Iron Hand Salamanders and Raven Guard. The betrayal was absolute, instantaneous, and ruthlessly efficient. There was no hesitation, no shouted challenge. There was only the roar of gunfire as brothers opened fire on brothers. The air filled with the shriek of dying transhumans and the incomprehensible sight of Astartes in the livery of the Hydra, gunning down the warriors of the Raven Guard with cold, calculated precision. The chaos was unimaginable. The trust that formed the very bedrock of the Legiones Astartes was shattered in a single deafening volley. From the perspective of the Imperium from that moment forward, there was no more debate. There was no room for nuance or speculation about the Alpha Legion's motives. The facts were written in the blood of 3 loyal legions on the sands of Istvan V. They had followed the War Master's orders. They had participated in the greatest act of treachery in human history. They had murdered their own kin in cold blood. Every sensor log, every garbled Vox intercept, every terrified testimony from the few who miraculously escaped the slaughter told the same story. The Hydra was a serpent that had shed its imperial skin to reveal the mark of the traitor underneath. In the halls of the Imperial Palace on Terra Rogel Dawn struck the name of Alfarius from the rolls of his brothers. For Malkador the Sigillite, they became an enemy to be exterminated. For the entire Imperium, the story of the Alpha Legion's fall was now complete. They had chosen their side, and it was with Horus the arch-traitor. The question of their loyalty was answered sealed in the armor-plated coffins of 10,000 Loyalist Marines. They were traitors. It was the one undeniable truth upon which the entire war would now be fought. The case against the Hydra seemed for all intents and purposes closed. If the betrayal at Istvan V was the Alpha Legion's declaration of secession from the Imperium, then their actions throughout the subsequent Horus heresy were the bloody repeated signatures confirming that oath. Their commitment to the War Master's cause was not a passive one. They became one of the most active and insidious tools in his arsenal. The case for their treason is not built on that single horrific moment of betrayal, but on a mountain of subsequent campaigns where they eagerly prosecuted the war against those who remained loyal to the Emperor. Among the most damning of these campaigns was their relentless pursuit of the shattered Raven Guard. Corvus Corax and the few survivors of his legion who escaped the slaughter at Istvan V were a broken force, a shadow of their former glory. Yet they possessed a unique, secret, advanced gene-crafting techniques that allowed Corax to accelerate the creation of new Space Marines, a desperate hope for rebuilding his ravaged legion. For the Alpha Legion, destroying the remaining Raven Guard was not enough. They sought to steal their very future. They hunted Corax's fleet across the galaxy, not with overwhelming force, but with their signature infiltration and sabotage. Operatives surgically altered to look like Raven Guard Marines sowed dissent and chaos within the refugee fleet. The final strike was a masterpiece of their cruel art. They didn't just attack the Raven Guard's fortress monastery Deliverance. They orchestrated events to steal the precious data and genetic samples related to the accelerated genocide. This was not merely an act of war, it was an act of profound violation, a theft designed to cripple a brother legion for generations, while providing the traitors with a powerful tool for their own dark ambitions. Further cementing their place in the traitor order of battle was their close cooperation with the most ardent of rebels. The war for the strategically vital Forge world of Paramar V showcased this military alliance in stark detail. Paramar was a linchpin of the Imperial war machine in the Segmentum Solar, and its capture was a high priority for Horus. The campaign to take it was a joint operation between the Alpha Legion and the War Master's own Sons of Horus. The synergy between the two legions was terrifyingly effective. While the Sons of Horus prepared for a characteristically brutal frontal assault, the Alpha Legion were already on the planet, moving like ghosts through the infrastructure of the Mechanicum priesthood and its Skitarii defenders. They assassinated key Magi uploaded scrap code to cripple the war machines and turned defensive installations against each other. When the Sons of Horus finally launched their attack, they found the planet's formidable defenses in a state of chaos and disarray. The Alpha Legion had, as was their custom, won the war before the first shot of the main battle was fired. This was no legion of renegades acting on their own whims. This was a cohesive and trusted part of the War Master's grand strategy, a legion fighting and bleeding alongside the very architects of the heresy, their actions inextricably linked to the traitor cause. The end of the Horus heresy did not bring an end to the Alpha Legion's war. When the traitor legions were broken at the Siege of Terra and fled to the Warpstorm sanctuary known as the Eye of Terror, Many warbands of the 60th Legion went with them. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has been assailed by these fractured remnants, and their actions provide some of the most compelling evidence that whatever their original intentions, the Alpha Legion has irrevocably fallen to the very powers the Emperor sought to defy. Their prolonged exposure to the Imperium and their constant war against the Imperium has left an undeniable stain upon their soul. In the 41st Millennium, the Alpha Legion no longer operates as a single cohesive entity. It has splintered into 1,000 autonomous warbands, a decentralized network of terror that perfectly suits their nature. Many of these warbands have established strongholds within the Eye of Terror and other warp rifts, fighting alongside the most damned of their traitor brethren. From these hellish sanctuaries, they launch raids into Imperial space not as strategic saboteurs, but as pirates and reavers. They raise cults on Imperial worlds, not to destabilize them for compliance, but to incite glorious rebellion in the name of the Dark Gods. Alpha Legion champions have been seen leading hordes of screaming cultists, their armor adorned with the profane symbols of the ruinous powers, fighting for personal glory and the favor of their malevolent patrons. For every Imperial observer, the conclusion is simple: you do not make your home in hell and consort with demons for 10 millennia as part of a secretly loyal plan. You do it because you have become part of the damnation. More damning than their alliances is the physical evidence of corruption etched into their very flesh and armor. The power of chaos is not a tool to be used without consequence. It is a mutagenic, soul-destroying force that demands a heavy price. And many within the Alpha Legion have clearly paid it. Inquisitorial reports and battlefield-picked captures show Alpha Legionaries bearing the unmistakable marks of chaotic boons. There are tales of headhunters whose stealth armor has fused into their skin, becoming a living chameleonic hide that whispers secrets of Slaanesh. There are accounts of sorcerers, their minds shattered and remade by Tzeentch, who manipulate causality and destiny with a power that could not have come from any source but the architect of fate. Warriors have been witnessed fighting with the unholy strength of Khorne, their calculated precision giving way to a bloody-minded frenzy. One cannot feign such corruption. The twisted flesh, the demonic auras, the eyes that burn with warp fire, these are not elements of a clever disguise. They are the symptoms of a profound spiritual disease, proof that the Legion is not immune to the lure of the warp. They have breathed the air of chaos for too long, and its taint has thoroughly infected them, body and soul. The final piece of evidence in the case against the Hydra is perhaps the most definitive and poignant: the death of their Primarch. Not in some shadowy conflict in the galactic hinterlands, but at the very doorstep of terror, in a direct confrontation with the Emperor's most steadfast guardian, Rogel Dawn. This was not an act of subterfuge or a strategic withdrawal. It was a Primarch of a traitor legion dying in the service of Horus's war, a fact that seems to permit no other interpretation. As Horus's fleet prepared its final apocalyptic assault on the throne world, the Alpha Legion was tasked with a critical mission to infiltrate and disrupt the solar system's formidable defenses. They sowed chaos-turned defense platforms against each other and forced the Loyalists to fight shadows in their own backyard. But at the gas giant Pluto and its moons, their path of misdirection ran headlong into a wall of unyielding resolve. Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists and Praetorian of Terror, personally led the counterattack. On the moon of Hydra, amidst a swirling, chaotic battle between fleets, the two Primarchs met face-to-face, a clash of diametrically opposed philosophies. Dawn was the fortress, immovable and absolute, his every action direct and unambiguous. Alpharius was the feint, the hidden dagger, his every move a question inside a riddle. Their duel was a spectacle of tragic grandeur. Alpharius, the smaller of the two, was a blur of motion, his pale spear, the Sarissa Nata, striking from a dozen angles at once, forcing Dawn back, testing his defenses, seeking a single perfect opening. He was the master strategist playing a lethal game of chess with a living opponent. But Dawn was not a strategist in that moment. He was an executioner. Filled with the cold, righteous fury of a son defending his father's home, he weathered the storm of attacks. His every block and parry with his colossal chainsword storm's teeth was brutal and absolute. He was wounded, outmaneuvered, and tactically on the defensive, yet he pressed forward his will, an impenetrable shield. The climax was swift and brutal. In a move of desperate, focused rage, Dawn ignored a spear thrust that pierced his shoulder, creating the one opening he needed. He lunged forward, grabbing the haft of Alpharius's weapon, and with a final grief-stricken roar, he brought the screaming teeth of his chainsword down upon the traitor Primarch. The blow was absolute. Alpharius was slain, his body nearly rent in two, his life extinguishing on the cold, nameless rock so far from where his journey began. The head of the Hydra, it seemed, had finally been severed. In the annals of the Imperium, this event is recorded as a great victory. A traitor Primarch was slain by a loyal son, and a critical threat to terror was neutralized. For the Imperial fists, it was a grim duty fulfilled. For the wider Imperium, it was the final confirmation of Alpharius's allegiance. He had died actively prosecuting Horus's war. What greater proof of treason could there be? Yet even in this moment of seeming clarity, the Alpha Legion's nature forces a disquieting question to the surface. Why would Alpharius, the supreme master of asymmetric warfare, the Primarch who never exposed himself unnecessarily, who won his wars through proxies and puppets, engage in a direct, head-to-head duel with a combatant as formidable and determined as Rogel Dawn? Was it arrogance? Was it a final, desperate gamble to cripple Terra's defender? Or was the death of a Primarch in this one specific place, at this one specific time, in this one specific way, also part of a plan? To the Imperium, the question is absurd, an attempt to grant strategic depth to a simple traitor's end. A dead Primarch is a dead Primarch. But with the Alpha Legion, the most obvious truth is often the most dangerous lie. And the death of Alpharius, while closing the case for his treason, simultaneously opened the door to an entirely new and far more disturbing set of possibilities. The evidence presented thus far paints a clear and damning portrait. The Alpha Legion traitors, oathbreakers, murderers of their own kin. This is the imperial truth, the story written in blood and fire, and for 10,000 years it has been enough. But history is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is merely curated by them. There exist other accounts, apocryphal texts, and censored testimonies that present not just a different narrative, but an entirely different war. To understand this, we must go back to a time before the heresy before Istvan, to a secret meeting that may have damned a legion to eternal honor and eternal shame. Long before Horus declared his rebellion, the twin Primarchs were sought out by a clandestine organization of immense age and power. They were known as the Cabal. They were not a single Xenos race, but a coalition of ancient species, some long since believed extinct, all bound by a single overarching purpose, the utter defeat of the primordial annihilator, the entity humanity called Chaos. They had watched the rise of mankind, studied the creation of the Primarchs, and foreseen the great war that was to come. They saw that humanity was the fulcrum upon which the fate of the galaxy would turn. Through their agents, they arranged a meeting with Alpharius and Omegon, choosing them specifically for their unique dual nature and their legion's mastery of covert operations. On the forgotten world of Eolith, the Primarchs were brought before the leaders of the Cabal. Using a technology that blended psychic projection and temporal mechanics, the Xenos organization showed the twins the future. Not a vague premonition, but a stark, cold presentation of causality. They presented two distinct paths that would diverge at the moment of Horus Lupercal's decision to rebel. The first future was the one the Emperor intended Horus is defeated and the Loyalists win the war. The Cabal revealed the terrible consequence of this victory. The Emperor would be interred upon the Golden Throne, a living but broken god. The Imperium, without his direct guidance, would descend into 10,000 years of dogma, religious fanaticism, and technological stagnation. It would become a rotting, corrupt empire, the very antithesis of the scientific and enlightened society the Emperor had dreamed of. And in this slow decay, humanity's burgeoning psychic potential, coupled with their endless suffering, would feed the Chaos Gods on a scale never before seen. The Imperium would become a galactic farm for the ruinous powers. In this future, the Emperor's victory would lead to Chaos's ultimate and eternal triumph, a galaxy locked in a perpetual state of damnation. The second future was unthinkable Horus wins. The Warmaster empowered by Chaos would conquer Terra and slay the Emperor. His victory, however, would be a Pyrrhic one. The forces of Chaos, inherently anarchic and self-destructive, would immediately turn upon themselves. Horus, a flawed and mortal vessel for such immense power, would lead humanity in a brief, brilliant, and utterly devastating spasm of self-annihilation. Mankind would be utterly extinguished from the galaxy within a few short generations. But this act, this final, terrible sacrifice, would have a staggering consequence. It would starve the Chaos Gods of their primary source of sustenance and power, the souls and emotions of humanity. The great game would end. Mankind would be martyred, but in their death they would save the entire galaxy from the eternal threat of chaos. Faced with these two horrifying destinies, a slow damnation of the soul, or a quick extinction of the species Alpharius and Omegon, were presented with an impossible choice. The Cabal asked them to make the ultimate sacrifice. They were to join Horus, not to serve chaos, but to ensure its ultimate defeat. They were to guide Horus to victory, to ensure humanity's swift end, and in doing so become the secret saviors of the galaxy. Their payment would be eternal damnation in the eyes of history. They would be traitors, villains, and monsters. They would have to destroy everything they had fought to build, betray every oath they had ever sworn, and murder the very brothers they had once stood beside. Their loyalty would not be to the Emperor, the man, but to his final, most desperate goal, a galaxy free from the grasp of chaos. According to these forbidden histories, the twin Primarchs accepted. In that moment, their legion was reborn with a new, terrible purpose. They would become a double-edged sword pretending to serve Horus, while secretly steering events towards the future the Cabal had outlined. This decision is the lens through which every subsequent action must be re-examined. It recasts the villains of Istvan V as martyrs, the saboteurs of the Raven Guard as tragic necessities, and the death of Alpharius at Pluto's moon as a potential calculated move in a game that transcended the simple binary of loyalist and traitor. This was the core of their new war to sacrifice humanity to save the galaxy. If we accept the horrifying revelation of the Cabal's prophecy as the Alpha Legion's true motive to secretly guide Horus to a self-destructive victory, then their entire operational history during the heresy must be re-examined. Actions that once appeared to be clear-cut treason are suddenly cast in a new, deeply ambiguous light. Looked at through this lens, the Exec Legion was not an asset to the War Master's war effort, but rather its most effective saboteur, a cancer that grew within the heart of the rebellion, weakening it from the inside under the perfect guise of loyalty. Consider their campaigns. The Alpha Legion's victories for the traitor cause were numerous, but strangely inefficient. They often chose targets of secondary strategic importance, launching complex, protracted operations that consumed vast amounts of the War Master's resources and time for relatively minor gains. These were victories that bled the rebellion, tying up fleets and manpower that would have been better used in the direct push towards Terra. The campaign on Paramar Fifth, the supposed showcase of their cooperation with the Sons of Horus, becomes suspect. Did they truly aid them, or did they subtly prolong the conflict, introducing unforeseen complications and logistical difficulties that kept Horus's elite forces bogged down for months longer than necessary? Every success seemed to carry a hidden cost for the traitors, a strategic poison pill wrapped in the sweet taste of victory. They were masters of a new kind of war, strategic attrition disguised as zealous contribution. Nowhere is this contradictory behavior more evident than in their handling of the Vashith Legion, the White Scars. Jagatai Khan and his warriors were isolated at the start of the heresy, their allegiance unknown. Horus, needing their speed and ferocity for the assault on Terra, tasked the Alpha Legion with bringing them into the fold. A simple traitor would have a clear objective: persuade or destroy. The Alpha Legion did neither. Instead, they engaged in a baffling campaign that seemed designed to achieve two opposing goals at once. Overtly, their fleets attacked the White Scars, engaging them in skirmishes and naval battles, providing a convincing performance for the War Master's observers that they were attempting to delay or neutralize the Vith Legion. Covertly, however, a separate Alpha Legion force seemed to be working to push the Khan in the opposite direction. They sent cryptic warnings, allowed Loyalist astropaths to escape their blockades to deliver messages to the Khan about Horus's treachery, and staged attacks that, while appearing vicious, always left a convenient path of retreat for the White Scars fleet towards Terra. They were simultaneously the obstacle and the signpost. This behavior is tactical insanity if their goal was to serve Horus. But it is strategic genius if their true goal was to subtly manipulate the fiercely independent Jagatai Khan, ensuring he would make the choice to race to Terra's defense of his own free will, thus delivering a powerful Loyalist legion to the Emperor's doorstep, while maintaining their own cover as traitors. It was a perfect example of the Hydra's methods, using one head to fight a battle while the other secretly guided the enemy to victory. To comprehend the sheer depth of the Alpha Legion's potential deception, one must look beyond their actions and delve into their very philosophy, a doctrine of identity so radical it fundamentally breaks from the norms of the Legionnaires Astartes. This philosophy is encapsulated in three simple yet infinitely complex words that serve as their creed, their password, and their ultimate psychological weapon: I am Alpharius. To an outsider, this is a simple statement of defiance or a lie to sow confusion. To a member of the XXth Legion, it is a literal truth. From the moment of their induction, every legionary was systematically stripped of their former identity and remade in the image of their primarch. Through psycho-indoctrination and mimetic conditioning, they were taught to think like Alpharius, to fight like Alpharius, and to see the galaxy through his eyes. The Legion was not an army commanded by a general. It was a single consciousness inhabiting thousands of bodies. The Primarch was the Legion, and the Legion was the Primarch. This doctrine was their greatest strength. It created an organization with no single point of failure. It allowed any operative to assume command, to continue any mission, because they were all running the same core programming. The death of an individual legionary was meaningless, as the consciousness of the Hydra would live on. When an Alpha Legionnaire stated, "I am Alpharius," he was not claiming to be the Primarch in body. He was affirming his place within that Gestalt intelligence. He was a living embodiment of the Legion's will, a fractal piece of the whole. This philosophy of a shared fluid identity forces us to re-examine the single most damning piece of evidence against them, the death of their Primarch at the hands of Rogel Dawn. We are left with a shocking, almost heretical question: who actually died on Pluto Rogel Dawn in his grief and fury, fought and killed a being he believed to be his brother Alpharius. The entity he faced certainly had the strength, speed, and cunning of a Primarch, but in a legion where the most elite warriors, the Linnaean Terminators, were chosen for their physical similarity to their genetic father, a legion that possessed surgical technology far in advance of the rest of the Imperium, a legion that practiced the art of impersonation as a sacrament could Dawn be certain, the hypothesis is as simple as it is. Terrifying the individual killed by Rogel Dawn was not the true Primarch Alpharius. He was a decoy, a willing sacrifice, one of his most loyal sons elevated in purpose and sent to die in his stead. The death itself was the mission. It was an act of theater on a galactic scale. To Horus and the other traitors, it was the ultimate proof of the Alpha Legion's loyalty. Their Primarch had died, trying to pave the way to Terra. It would have erased any lingering doubt about their commitment and given them unparalleled freedom to operate within the traitor ranks. It was the ultimate deception, a lie so profound it was sealed with the blood of a demigod-level warrior. The death on Pluto was not a defeat. It was the Alpha Legion's masterpiece. They sacrificed their king to win the war, obscuring the fact that they had a second hidden king, Omegon, still in play, his existence now shielded more securely than ever before. The Praetorian of Terror did not kill the head of the Hydra. He merely killed one of its many faces. Perhaps the most compelling and tragic piece of evidence for a hidden loyalist faction within the Alpha Legion comes not from the fires of the heresy itself, but from its smoldering ashes. The war was over. Horus was dead. The Emperor was enthroned upon his golden prison, and the traitor legions were shattered, fleeing before the righteous fury of the Great Scouring. The Imperium was being rebuilt, its new foundation laid by the steady, pragmatic hands of the returned Primarch Robuta Guilliman. It was in this era of grim reconstruction that a secret and seemingly impossible meeting took place. A lone, unmarked vessel breached the security cordons of a system where the Lord Commander of the Imperium was overseeing a campaign. From it came a single warrior, clad in the unadorned serpentine plate of the Alpha Legion. He was granted an audience, an act of sheer disbelief to Guilliman's honor guard. The warrior claimed to be Alfarius. To Guilliman, this was an impossibility. His brother Rogaldorn had been unequivocal about slaying the Primarch of the Gexekth Legion at Pluto, yet the figure before him possessed the unmistakable aura of a Primarch. We now know this was almost certainly Omegon, the surviving twin, using the identity of his fallen brother as the ultimate mask. He did not come seeking battle or offering threats. He came with a proposal that could have reshaped the future of the Imperium. With Horus defeated, he explained their mission was complete. He offered to bring the full, uncorrupted, and still cohesive might of the Alpha Legion back into the Imperial fold. He proposed a truce, a reconciliation, a chance to once again serve the Imperium they had been created to protect. This offer was a moment of truth, a crossroads in history. It was a staggering admission implying that the Alpha Legion's war had been with Horus, not the Emperor, all along. A truly traitorous legion, having lost its master, would have fled to the Eye of Terror to regroup or carve out its own empire. Yet here was their Primarch, or a being with his full authority, offering to surrender his forces to Imperial command. But Robuta Guilliman was a being forged by the horrors of the heresy. He had seen the galaxy burn, had mourned the deaths of trillions, and had lost his father and so many of his brothers to the very treachery this figure before him represented. For Guilliman the pragmatist, the offer might have been a tempting strategic asset. But for Guilliman the avenging son, it was an insult. The sins of Istvan Fif were absolute and unforgivable. He could not look past the slaughter of the Iron Hands Raven Guard and Salamanders. Guilliman's refusal was cold, absolute, and final. He saw only a trick, another layer in an endless game of lies, and even if the offer were true, the pardon requested was impossible to grant. He denied the offer of reconciliation and declared the Alpha Legion traitors forever to be hunted and exterminated without mercy. In that single moment of judgment, Guilliman, in his righteous and understandable grief, slammed the door shut on the Alpha Legion's potential return. He pushed them away, forcing them into a solitary existence in the shadows. Any loyalist elements within the Legion, likely commanded by Omegon, were now truly damned. They were eternally branded as traitors by the Imperium they had sought to rejoin, and they were enemies of the Chaos war bands they had only ever pretended to serve. Guilliman's decree forced them to continue their silent war alone, their original purpose now a lost cause, their fate sealed. They were condemned to be the galaxy's eternal enigma, forever caught between a light that had cast them out and a darkness they had never truly embraced. We stand now at an impasse of history, confronted by two narratives that are both compelling and mutually exclusive. One narrative, written in the blood of Loyalists, proves the Alpha Legion to be incontrovertible traitors. The other, pieced together from whispers and paradoxes, suggests a loyalty so profound it masqueraded as the ultimate heresy. How can both be true? How can a single legion fight so zealously for Horus, while simultaneously working to undermine his every move? The answer may lie in the most logical and yet most tragic of theories. The Hydra was not a single entity, but a house divided against itself. The Legion did not fall. It shattered. This is the schism of the Hydra theory. It posits that the meeting with the Cabal did happen, and the twin Primarchs Alpharius and Omegon initially agreed to their terrible plan, but they were two separate beings, and they walked two different paths. Alpharius, the more public face of the Legion, was the one who interacted directly with Horus and the other traitor Primarchs. He was exposed to the full, unfiltered power of their ambition and the corrupting influence of the warp. Over time, one of two things happened. Either he was genuinely tainted by chaos, or he came to truly believe in Horus's cause, seeing the Emperor's Imperium as a failed tyrannical dream. He began to fight, not to fulfill the Cabal's prophecy, but to ensure a true victory for the rebellion. His was the hand that guided the massacres that embraced Chaos warbands, and that ultimately met its end at the hands of Rogel Dawn in a sincere attempt to conquer Terra. Omegon, the Shadow Twin, the Efrit, remained true to their original horrifying pact. Or perhaps, seeing his brothers fall, he adapted. He realized that Horus's victory, guided by a genuinely corrupted Alpharius, would no longer lead to the swift end the Cabal predicted, but to a new and terrible reign of chaos. Omegon's mission changed from ensuring Horus's victory to ensuring his defeat, all while maintaining the Legion's cover. He became a saboteur not of the Imperium, but of his own Legion's traitorous actions. It was Omegon who engineered the inefficient victories, who subtly warned the White Scars, and who, after his brother's death and Horus's defeat, attempted to bring the loyalist elements of his Legion back to the Imperium. The two Primarchs, the two heads of the Hydra, began working towards opposite goals, turning their shared Legion into a battlefield. This schism born during the heresy did not end with it. It has continued for 10,000 years, a secret civil war fought in the shadows. The Alpha Legion that the Imperium sees in the 41st Millennium is not one organization, but at least two diametrically opposed and fighting for the Legion's soul. The warbands that operate out of the Eye of Terror, that bear the marks of chaos, corruption, and raid imperial worlds for plunder and faith, are the heirs of Alpharius's path. They are true traitors fighting for the ruinous powers. But there are other cells, the ones that operate deep within imperial space, whose actions are far more ambiguous. These are the agents of Omegon's legacy. When an imperial governor is assassinated, is it an act of terror, or was that governor secretly tainted by chaos? When a Chaos Fleet's astropathic choir is mysteriously silenced before a major attack, was it a rival warband, or was it Omegon's operatives? The Imperium sees only the symbol of the Hydra and assumes a single enemy. They fail to realize that many of the Alpha Legion's seemingly random acts of terror are in fact attacks by one faction against the other. They are witnessing the crossfire of a war where both sides are ghosts, their battlefield the very fabric of the Imperium, their conflict the longest and most secret civil war in human history. The schism of the Hydra theory provides a compelling framework for the Legion's contradictory actions. But there exists another darker possibility. It is a theory that suggests the Hydra is not and never was divided. Instead, it is perfectly whole, its every head working in concert towards a single secret and truly audacious goal. What if the Alpha Legion is not fighting for the Emperor, nor for Horus, nor for Chaos? What if they are fighting for humanity against all who would seek to enslave it? This theory posits that the Alpha Legion, through their own peerless intelligence networks, or the revelations from the Cabal, came to see the grander, more terrible truth of the galaxy. They saw that the Emperor and the gods of chaos were two sides of the same coin of tyranny. The Emperor offered order, but it was the order of a gilded cage, a brutal repressive regime that crushed human freedom and individuality in the name of survival. The Imperium was a slow path to spiritual stagnation. The Chaos gods offered freedom, but it was the freedom of madness and damnation, a different and more horrifying form of slavery that consumed the soul. The Alpha Legion saw that for humanity to ever be truly free, it had to be free from all gods, all masters, all galactic powers that sought to use it as a pawn in their cosmic game. From this perspective, their entire strategy changes. They did not side with Horus to help him win, nor did they secretly work to ensure his defeat. They worked to ensure the Horus heresy was the most devastating, protracted, and mutually destructive war possible. Their goal was to cripple both sides. Every victory for Horus that also bled his legions dry was a success. Every act of sabotage against the Imperium that also exposed its weaknesses and sowed mistrust was a victory. They were not loyalists or traitors. They were accelerants throwing fuel on the fires of both sides, seeking to burn down the entire corrupt structure of the galaxy, so that something new, something truly human, could one day grow from the ashes. They are the ultimate enemies of the status quo, fighting a three-way war against the Imperium, against chaos, and against anyone else who would claim dominion over the fate of mankind. If this is their true path, it is a path of profound and exquisite tragedy. It is a war they are almost certainly doomed to lose. To stand against both the monolithic power of the Imperium and the insidious eternal might of the Chaos Gods is a fool's errand. They are a single legion fighting alone against the entire universe. They are hated and hunted by all their motives completely misunderstood. Every agent they lose is a sacrifice no one will ever mourn. Every small victory they achieve is a secret that will die with them. Theirs is a war fought for the highest of ideals of free humanity, but it is waged in the darkest of shadows, with the certainty of eventual defeat as their constant companion. They are the ultimate nihilists or the ultimate idealists' martyrs for a future that will likely never come, to pass their entire existence a testament to a noble, beautiful, and utterly hopeless cause. Regardless of the truth, whether they are loyalists, traitors, a legion divided, or secret revolutionaries, the legacy of the Alpha Legion in the 41st Millennium is undeniable. Their greatest victory was not a battle or a campaign, but the successful transformation of their entire legion into an idea, a concept. And that concept is one of absolute, pervasive uncertainty. They have become a weaponized narrative, and their impact is felt far beyond the worlds they touch directly. In a grim irony, the Alpha Legion has become one of the Imperium's most effective tools of internal control. They are the ultimate boogeyman. For 10,000 years, the Inquisition, the Officio Assassinorum, and the highest echelons of the Adeptus Terra have used the formless, ever-present threat of the Alpha Legion to justify their own actions. Is a popular planetary governor gaining too much support, he is an Alpha Legion puppet. Is a workers' guild demanding better conditions, they have been infiltrated by Alpha Legion agents. Is a military commander questioning orders, his loyalty has been compromised. The mere possibility of their involvement is enough to sign a death warrant for a world to sanction a purge to justify any atrocity in the name of security. The Hydra has become a phantom that haunts the Imperium, a self-perpetuating lie used by the powerful to enforce conformity and punish dissent. They are the perfect nameless fear, and the Imperium has learned to wield that fear with brutal efficiency. Yet in this dark role, they serve another, perhaps unintentional purpose. The Imperium of the 41st Millennium is a stagnant, decaying behemoth, prone to corruption and complacency. The Alpha Legion in all its manifestations is a force that resists this stagnation. They are the whetstone upon which the blades of the Imperium are kept sharp. Their constant unpredictable attacks, their probing of defenses, their exploitation of every flaw in the vast Imperial machine forces it to adapt, to evolve, and to never rest. They are a necessary, if hated, catalyst for change. They expose corrupt officials, test the loyalty of regiments, and force Imperial strategists to think in new, unconventional ways. Like a predator stalking a herd, they cull the weak, the slow, and the stupid, ensuring that only the strongest and most vigilant elements of the Imperium survive. Whether their goal is to destroy the Imperium or to save it, their actions inadvertently serve to strengthen it, constantly challenging its weaknesses and preventing the slow rot of peace from ever truly setting in. To find the potential endgame of the Alpha Legion's 10,000-year-long war, we must look away from the Legion itself and towards another of the galaxy's perpetual enigmas. He is a being who, like the Hydra, exists in a quantum state of loyalty and treason. He is the keeper of secrets, the bringer of chaos and salvation, an entity known only by his title, Cypher, Lord of the Fallen. The intersecting paths of this mysterious figure and the operatives of the Alpha Legion are too numerous, too convenient to be mere coincidence. They suggest a silent dialogue, a shared purpose that might point towards the final shocking truth. There is no record of any formal alliance, yet across the galaxy and across the centuries where one is found, the other is often nearby, acting in strange and complementary ways. On the hive world of Tenebris, an Inquisitor closing in on a cell of fallen angels was suddenly recalled when his flagship's logic engines were crippled by a burst of Alpha Legion scrap code. On the cardinal world of Saints Hope, Cypher was seen assassinating a high-ranking ecclesiarch. Days later, it was revealed the cardinal had been the head of a Genestealer cult, a truth uncovered by a data slate leaked by an Alpha Legion operative. They move like two opposing magnetic fields that create a unified effect, never touching, but always influencing one another. They are not allies in any traditional sense. Rather, they appear to be two separate powers, engaged in the same secret war, occasionally clearing obstacles from each other's path when their immediate objectives align. They are two grandmasters playing on the same board, acknowledging each other's moves with a silent nod of professional respect. What then could be this shared, unspoken objective Cypher's goal whispered in the halls of the Rock and the interrogation chambers of the Inquisition is to reach the golden throne of terror itself. Whether he seeks to slay the Emperor to beg his forgiveness or to enact some other unknown plan is the subject of endless debate. And it is here at the very heart of the Imperium that the Alpha Legion's great plan may finally converge with his. Could it be that Omegon or the shadowy council that inherited his mission has the very same endgame? The theory is as compelling as it is terrifying. The true loyalist remnants of the Alpha Legion are also fighting a secret war to reach the Emperor. Perhaps like Cypher, they carry a relic or a piece of information vital to the Emperor's future, a final message from a time before the heresy, the key to his resurrection or the mercy of a final death. This reframes their entire 10,000-year history. They are not just fighting to survive or to weaken their enemies, they are fighting their way inch by bloody inch through the layers of Imperial security and history towards a single final destination. They and Cypher are not allies, but perhaps rivals in the same great race. Their silent cooperation may simply be a matter of convenience before the final confrontation, for only one of them can be the first to reach the throne world and unveil their ultimate secret. The fate of the Alpha Legion in the end may be inextricably tied to the fate of the Emperor himself. We have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, a history written in disappearing ink. We have examined the evidence, weighed the testimony of the dead and the damned, and now we stand at the heart of the great paradox of the Alpha Legion. What have we found? We have found a legion that with cold precision slaughtered their brothers on the black sands of Istvan Fiv. We have found a legion that hunted the survivors of that massacre, stole their future, and fought eagerly alongside the arch-traitor. We have seen them embrace the corruption of chaos and watched their Primarch die in a failed attempt to conquer terror. The evidence for their treason is absolute, written in the bedrock of Imperial history. And yet we have also found a whisper of a different war, a story of a secret pact made with an ancient Xenos intelligence, a terrible choice between two forms of extinction for mankind. We have re-examined their campaigns and seen not victories for Horus, but a pattern of brilliant, insidious sabotage. We have questioned the very nature of their identity, and found that the Primarch's death may have been their greatest deception. We have learned of an offer of reconciliation to the Imperium, a plea from the shadows that was rejected, damning them to an eternal solitary war. The evidence for their secret, terrible loyalty is just as compelling, just as plausible as the evidence for their treason. We are therefore forced to confront the ultimate conclusion. The question itself, are they traitors or are they loyal, may have been the wrong question from the very beginning. It is a child's question, a query that demands a simple binary answer in a galaxy that is anything but. To ask this of the Alpha Legion is to fall into their oldest and most effective trap. They have weaponized ambiguity. Their very nature defies the simple labels that the Imperium uses to define its heroes and its enemies. They have transcended the concepts. Their loyalty was never to a single man, be it the Emperor on his throne or Horus on his battle barge. Their loyalty was not to a faction, an empire, or a creed. Their loyalty was to an idea, the survival of the human species by any means necessary at any cost. And the cost was total. The price of their war was their own humanity. They sacrificed their honor at Istvan V. They sacrificed their souls to the feigned embrace of chaos. They sacrificed their unity in a secret civil war. And most importantly, they sacrificed the truth. They understood perhaps better than any of their brothers that in the great war for the galaxy, the truth was not a shield, but a liability. It was a weakness to be exploited in an enemy, and a burden to be discarded by oneself. So they burned their own history, erased their own motives, and became a living lie. They committed every sin, bore every shame, and accepted the mantle of the villain so that humanity in some form might have a future. They are the saviors who dress as monsters, the shepherds who wear the skins of wolves, their methods indistinguishable from those of the ultimate evil. Their goal, perhaps, the ultimate good. In the endless grinding present of the 41st millennium, a lone figure moves through the shadows of a crowded underhive. His armor is the color of a midnight sea, its surfaces shifting and blurring, refusing to be clearly seen. His face is hidden behind a blank, impassive helmet. We do not know his name, his rank, or his mission. Is he here to place a bomb that will destabilize the rule of the imperial governor? Or is he here to eliminate a Slaneshi cult that has taken root in the spire above? Is he acting on the 10,000-year-old orders of Omegon, a loyal son fighting a forgotten war? Or is he a fervent follower of the ruinous powers, a true traitor, enacting the will of a long-dead Alfarius? We cannot know. He is a ghost, a question mark given form. He pauses before a pane of grimy glass, and for a moment he sees his own reflection. It is the face of no one, and therefore it is the face of everyone. From his vox grill, a synthesized voice whispers the only truth that has ever mattered, the creed that has sustained his brotherhood through 10 millennia of shame and secrecy. I am Alfarius. The search for the truth of the Alpha Legion is a fool's errand. For every fact that is uncovered, every head of the Hydra that is severed, 2 more will grow in its place, more tangled, more contradictory than the last. That is their nature. That is their doctrine. And ultimately that is their victory. Hydra Ascendant.